what does it mean to have shame? Shame is a feeling of embarrassment or humiliation that arises from the perception of having done something dishonorable, immoral, or improper. People who experience shame usually try to hide the thing they feel ashamed of. When shame becomes chronic, it can involve the feeling that you are fundamentally flawed. We all feel shame from time to time. Shame can often be hard to identify in oneself. Hi, my name is Jyotika Bedi. I'm the founder of Happiness is Love. While shame is a negative emotion, its origins play part in our survival as species. Without shame, we might not feel the need to adhere to any cultural norms, follow any laws, or behave in a way that allows us to exist as social beings. But the question really is, when does shame become harmful? Shame can be problematic when it becomes internalized and results in an overly harsh evaluation of oneself as a whole person. This inner critique might tell you that you are a bad person, that you are worthless, or have no value. The truth is, how deeply you feel ashamed often has little to do with your worth or what you have done wrong. And as a parent, I'm very passionate to talk about shame openly and confront it with love and empathy. With shame comes humiliation, embarrassment, and guilt. However, these different terms have nuances and meaning that are important to know to better understand what shame truly is. What are the symptoms of shame? Are you wondering whether you might be experiencing some kind of shame? I've curated a list of self-defeating shame reactions according to psychiatrist Peter Breggin in his book, Guilt, Shame and Anxiety. Feeling sensitive or being overly worried about what other people think of you. Feeling unappreciated, used, or like others take advantage of you. Feeling rejected, regretful, inadequate, or like you have very little impact. Uncontrollable blushing or being afraid to look inappropriate or sometimes stupid. Worrying that you aren't treated with respect or wanting to have the last word. Feeling that you can't be your true self. Losing your identity or not sharing your thoughts or feelings because you are afraid to be embarrassed. Being more worried about failure than doing something immoral or dishonorable. Being a perfectionist. Feeling like an outsider, that you are different or left out, or feeling suspicious and like you can't trust others. Being a wallflower or shrinking violet, wanting to shut people out or withdraw. Trying to hide or be inconspicuous or not wanting to be the center of attention. These behaviors that I've shared with you are examples of things that people do when they feel shame. Looking down instead of looking people in the eye. Keeping their head hung low or slumping their shoulders instead of standing up straight. Feeling frozen or unable to move. Not being able to act spontaneously. Stuttering when trying to speak or talking in an overly soft voice. Hiding themselves from others, crying if they feel shame or embarrassed. There are 4 categories of shame behavior. In the academic book Shame, published by Oxford University Press, the authors identified 4 categories of shame behaviors. The hot response, behaviors to cope with or conceal shame, safety behaviors to avoid shame or being discovered. And the last one was behaviors to repair shame. So let's understand the hot response. These are things you do when you feel embarrassed and defensive. We all do, such as lash. The hot response. These are things we do when we feel embarrassed and defensive, such as lashing out in anger or attacking the other person to deflect the attention from ourselves. We all do this. The hot response is usually an impulsive reaction. Behaviors to cope with or conceal shame. These behaviors include doing things to make yourself feel small, trying to avoid being the center of attention, or not sharing your thoughts or feelings openly. Concealing yourself is also a method of self-protection. Safety behaviors to avoid shame or being discovered. This category of shame behaviors might be things like over-apologizing, crying, or avoiding conflict. People who have a tendency towards being emotional or avoiding any kind of conflict may be more likely to engage in safety behaviors. Behaviors to repair shame. These might include things like doing things to soothe yourself or apologizing to others. For example, if you forgot an important anniversary, let's say, you might tell yourself that you had a lot on your mind, or engage in gestures to show that you really are sorry. Can you make the distinction between the two? Types of shame. In addition to the 4 broad categories of shame that have been identified, that I've just shared with you, there are also many different types of shames. Below I have for you some that we all need to consider. Transient shame. Transient shame refers to that fleeting feeling you might feel when you make a mistake, which we all do, perhaps in a social setting. It usually passes very quickly and doesn't create problems in your life. In fact, transient shame may even be beneficial because it's beneficial by causing you to pay more attention to maybe feedback that you have received from others, and it usually propels growth and development. Chronic shame. Chronic shame is with you all the time, and it makes you feel as though you are not good enough. It makes you feel as if you are not worthy enough, and this type of shame can impair our functioning and it impacts our mental health. Humiliation. Humiliation is one of the most intense forms of shame, and it comes about when we are critically embarrassed about something. Often this is felt when something happens in front of others. It looks like defeat sometimes. We might feel shame when experiencing failure or defeat. If you lose a sporting match, for example, that you were expecting to win, for example, you may feel intense shame. And you may feel this shame in the loss, or you might feel shame when you didn't get a promotion at work that you were really excited about, or something that you were really talking about to your friends and family. Shame around strangers. Shame around strangers reflects a feeling that they will discover that something is wrong with you, and this type of shame is very common in social anxiety. I work a lot with young adults, and there are studies have found that cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT therapy, reduces social anxiety symptoms by reducing one's proneness to shame. In front of others, shame is something that we all experience, but when we feel too embarrassed and when this feeling becomes too intense, it becomes unmanageable. This form of shame is linked to the feeling of deep humiliation. There's also performance shame. Feeling self-conscious about one's performance is another type of shame. This tends to show up when, let's say, in public speaking as well as during musicals and athletic performances. Some theorists also argue that performance shame actually serves as a transformational force, impacting both the performer and others at the event. Shame about the self. Feeling as though you are an inferior person can lead to shame about the self. This is a chronic type of shame with long-lasting effects. Unrequited love. Shame that results from unrequited love is another type of shame. This is a feeling of not feeling good enough or feeling worthy enough for someone else's love. Unwanted exposure and public humiliation involves unwanted exposure and makes up another type of shame. An example would be making a mistake in public and having someone point it out and reminding you of your mistakes. Disappointment or failure. If your expectations are not met or you fail at something, we all experience shame related to failure at some point in our lives, or disappointment. This is closely linked to shame about defeat. There is also exclusion. If you feel as though you are being excluded from a group, not liked by the group, or that you don't belong that feeling of I am not included, you might experience some form of shame about being left out. And this I find is pervasive. This type is also common in social anxiety. Internalized shame refers to shame that has been turned inwards. For example, those of us who experience maybe some kind of childhood trauma may experience a feeling of being unworthy or feel shame related to their childhood trauma or some kind of abuse. There's also toxic shame. Toxic shame is similar to internalized shame in that it involves the notion that there is something inherently wrong with you in the inside. Toxic shame is a part of our core identity sometimes rather than a transient state. And people who experience toxic shame may try to present a perfect outer self to hide how they truly feel on the inside. And this is extremely common nowadays. Healthy shame. Finally, there's healthy shame that does exist. Shame can be healthy when it causes you to have more humility. It allows you to laugh at yourself, makes you humble and grounded, or teaches you about boundaries. Without at least a little bit of shame, people would have trouble measuring the effects of their behaviors on others. So there is also healthy shame that we can learn from. Out of all that I have shared with you about shame, what resonates the most with you? The idea really is to face shame with grace, confront it with empathy and love, because we all are human, and what connects us all is our humanness. And that's why the world now needs more love, more healing, more health and happiness, and we are stronger together when we are facing all our shame, when we are facing all our difficulties, our challenges, because together we are better. Stay tuned for more.